Hello everyone, I'm Jackson and welcome back to How to Policy Debate. In today's video, we'll be moving on from the basics of policy and into more specific details regarding argumentation. In this first set of more specific videos, we'll be covering the affirmative. Today, we'll be starting by talking about how teams should choose the affirmative they read for the year. So, as you're already aware, Policy Debate has year-long resolutions. Now, a lot of teams will change up the AFs they read as the season progresses, but at the beginning of a season, picking your first AF can be a daunting task. Picking an AF involves crafting a 1AC to read in a round and creating extensive prep for the 2AC. Generally, because the 2A controls the strategic vision for the affirmative, the 2A should choose the AF that the team will read. After crafting a 1AC for their partner, a 2A should focus on collecting answers to off-case positions for a year's topic and on acquiring evidence that will help support the arguments from the 1AC in later speeches. There are two main ways to get an affirmative: camp files or creating it yourself. I'd recommend that at least once in your policy career, you should attempt to write your own AF, as it will hone your research skills. However, for more novice debaters or debaters who don't have the time to write a full AF, camp files exist. Every summer, camps run for policy debate, and at these camps, students will research a variety of arguments. At the end of the camp, all the research that the students did will be made available by the Open Evidence Project, to which there's a link in the description. Here, teams can download evidence for pre-written affirmatives. This serves as a really solid starting off point for teams at the beginning of the season, and can provide stock argumentation that lasts for the duration of a topic. If you're more interested in reading a unique affirmative, then you'll have to make it on your own. Generally, teams will create their own AFs in order to gain a strategic advantage going into rounds. Unpredictability. By not reading an AF available online, teams with their own unique AFs will be able to surprise their opponents much more frequently, making it harder for the 1 and C to craft a strategic vision for the neg. I think it's important to say that very good teams will read stock AFs from online, and some bad teams will try to write their own AFs. Having a unique affirmative isn't necessarily a recipe for success. Instead, you should focus on understanding the arguments your affirmative is making, as that's the real way to win rounds. So now on to choosing or creating an affirmative. There are three main types of affirmatives in policy: big stick AFs, soft left AFs, and KAFs. Let's start with big stick AFs. These affirmatives will have one or more advantages that almost always lead to a very large impact, which is most likely going to be extinction. The idea behind big stick AFs is that the 2AR can focus on having a clearer link into a really big impact and focus on why really big impacts are bad. Oftentimes, the link scenarios that get the team to extinction are unique and not immediately obvious. So from the outside, a lot of these affirmatives look, and let's be honest, a lot of them are somewhat convoluted in how they arrive at their very large impacts. Next, we have soft left AFs. If you know how traditional LD debate works, then soft left AFs will sound a lot like a trad LD case. These affirmatives, instead of going for the biggest impact, go for an impact that the AF team says is morally worse than all other impacts. Oftentimes, these types of affirmatives will read multiple cards on a separate framing page during the 1AC. This framing page serves to set up the affirmative's philosophy, which says why the impacts they prevent are uniquely worse than other impacts. For example, framing pages might focus on stopping racism, ending domestic violence, or combating the patriarchy. The affirmative claims that these impacts should come a priori, or before everything else, meaning that they outweigh any big stick extinction impacts that the neg can cook up. On a soft left AF, the affirmative takes a moral position which says that their impacts are worse morally than their opponents. Finally, we have critical AFs or KFs. Similar to how a K by the negative will propose an alternate model for how the round should be evaluated, a KF does the same thing. Oftentimes, critical affirmatives will not read a plan text and instead indict the inherent assumptions that the resolution has made. Considering that this is supposed to be a video series for relatively new debaters, I won't cover KFs in depth because they are generally the realm of older, more experienced teams. Because KFs advocate for a shifting of the conventional norms within debate, having a good understanding of those norms is an important prerequisite to reading a KF, which is why novice teams should rarely, if ever, read them. KFs can present a unique challenge for the negative, as they usually agree that something is inherently bad about the resolution. However, instead of using this as a justification for a negative ballot, a KF instead uses this problem with the resolution as justification for radical action that combats and erases whatever is structurally flawed within the resolution. And there you have it. That's the three main types of affirmatives in policy. For a final note, when you're choosing the type of affirmative you want to run for the entire or just part of the season, remember to play to your strengths. If you have a deep understanding of philosophy, possibly from LD, then a soft left or KF might be right up your alley. If instead you're an economics or policy wonk, then big stick apps with unique impact scenarios could be your calling. No one type of affirmative is inherently better than any other. So long as you understand the arguments you're making well and can defend them in the 2AC, ideally better than your opponents indict them, then you should do just fine in rounds.